kick, push like Lupe. Leg kicked out like the mama, that's how I shoot fades. Laced up in the box, now we looking like shoestrings. Fofo on my hip, say that he acting odd though. Sawed off under the seat, call it El Chapo. Hoes all over the place, looking like potholes. He dies, then he dies, now I'm sounding like Drago. Always let them bury themselves, that's how you sense fakes. I always aim straight for the head, that's how you kill snakes. Blood all over the place, told you we didn't play. Arms stretched down on the floor, just like Jesus laid. Green villains.
Welcome to another episode of the Inner Heel Turn podcast, and here we are, part 5 on the unraveling of Antonio Brown, which we've basically just gone through his whole life and everything. So look, there's not going to be a recap. So if you need a recap of the other 4 episodes, please, by all means, go back and listen. Anyway, I am your host, JB, and thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, review, all that. It's 2026. Even though that's everybody says it, 80% of us don't do it. But I'm still going to throw it out there anyway, because technically that's what I'm supposed to do. So let's start this episode off with basically just what could have been with Antonio Brown. Not really the facts of what happened. We're going to go over the facts, however hard they are, of basically what if and what could have been. What if things had been different? And by different, I don't mean what if Antonio Brown had been a better person. Because the lens of this entire episode is going to be trying to show you that being a better person is not simply a choice you make at 35 without the foundation for it having been laid decades earlier. What I mean is, what if the support systems, the institutions, the people around him have responded differently at specific moments? Let's start with the most painful counterfactual. What if Eddie Brown had stayed? I know we can't go back. I know Eddie Brown made his choices and they are his. But the cascade that flows from that one decision, the hole in the middle of Antonio's psychological development, the validation addiction, the desperate need to be told he was enough by an institution that could never feel the specific shape of that need. All of that flows from that one decision made in Miami in 2004. If Eddie had stayed, if he had been the father his son needed, not a perfect father, not a saint, but a present, engaged, I see you and you are enough father, how different does the rest of the story look? I don't know, and neither do you. But I am confident that the specific psychological profile we've been tracking throughout all these episodes, the validation addiction, the inability to accept perceived slights, the burning of relationships before they can leave you, that profile is shaped most directly by what happened between Antonio and his father. And that profile is the engine of so much of what went wrong. The second, what if the NFL had genuinely robust, non-performance mental health support system? Not the system it performs having. The press releases about, the player wellness, the hotline numbers on the website, the therapists available through team programs who, as Brown himself put it, come from the palace, but a real system. One that employs doctors who come from the communities these players come from, who understand what it means to grow up in poverty in Miami or Compton or the south side of Chicago, who understand the specific intersection of black masculinity and emotional expression and the cultural pressures that make "I need help" feel like the most dangerous sentence a man can say, who understands sports culture and what retirement means to a man for whom the sport was everything. That system does not currently exist in a comprehensive form. And without it, The therapy that is available to players like Brown is often inaccessible in the ways that matter most. Not practically inaccessible, but culturally inaccessible. The fit just isn't there. The language isn't there. And without the fit, the therapy, it doesn't work. And without the therapy working, the underlying issues compound. Now, the third, what if the NFL's concussion protocol had been more aggressive in 2016 after the vicious hit? What if Brown had been required to sit out longer, not just the next game, but multiple games under a monitored protocol designed to ensure full neurological recovery before return? What if the league had taken his documented post-hit behavior, the social media videos, the symptoms his family reported to doctors seriously enough to require an extended evaluation? Would that have made a difference to the accumulation of damage? We cannot know. But the question is worth asking. And it is worth asking not just about Brown, but about every player in every contact sport who returns to the field before their brain has fully recovered. The fourth, what if the NFL teams that brought Brown on in his later years, the Raiders, the Patriots, the Buccaneers, what if they had required, as a condition of signing him, genuine, sustained, monitored mental health treatment? Not as a PR gesture, not as a box to check, but as an actual requirement. You work with this clinical team consistently or the contract voids. The Raiders gave him $30 million. What if $1 million of that was earmarked for a dedicated mental health support team, specifically chosen for cultural competence with full access and required attendance? Would it have changed anything? Maybe not, but maybe the damage was already too deep. But maybe it would have helped. And we will never know because nobody asked the question. The teams asked, can he play? They did not ask, what does this person actually need? And then there is that most uncomfortable for me to raise because it implicates all of us who watched. Every time Antonio Brown did something outrageous, every time he posted the fine documents, every time he showed up in the fur coat, every time he removed his jersey, every time he went to TikTok live at 2 a.m., who was there? Who watched? Who shared? Who said, did you see that what AB did now? Who turned his crisis into an entertainment monument? All of us. We all participated. We watched his deterioration the way people watch a building that's on fire, with a mixture of horror and fascination. Unable to look away, we clicked on it, we rated it, we made memes on it, we tweeted about it, we gave it views and engagement and traffic, and in doing so, we gave Antonio Brown exactly what he has always needed most: attention, validation, the roar of the crowd for the worst possible reasons. We rewarded the breakdown. We trained the machine to produce more of it, and we never, in any meaningful collective way, stopped to say, this is a person who is suffering. This is someone who needs help, not an audience. Now, I include myself in this. I mean, this is the basis of what made me want to do this whole series. I watched the clips. I've talked about the incidents. But really, it doesn't entirely exempt me from having been one more set of eyes, one more click, one more person in the audience for his unraveling. We failed him. Not as much as his father failed him, not as much as the system failed him, but we participated in the failure. And if we can at least acknowledge that, then maybe we do better next time. Maybe when the next Antonio Brown is visible, going through something clearly serious in public, we ask different questions before we share the clip. But now the big question, though, is the legacy question. Will Antonio Brown be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? That is the question I've been getting since January 2022, and I want to give it the serious treatment it deserves because it is not a simple question. On the field, the case is hands down. You can't even argue the case. Kevin Colbert, the general manager who built the Steelers teams Brown played on, a man whose job was to evaluate football talent for 2 decades, says the Hall of Fame case can't even be debated. I agree with it. And on the merits of what Antonio Brown did on the field, he belongs in Canton. 928 receptions, 12,291 receiving yards, 83 touchdowns, 7 Pro Bowls, 4 consecutive first-team All-Pros, the most dominant 6-year stretch by a wide receiver in modern NFL history, a Super Bowl championship, ranked among the top 10 in receivers in NFL history by multiple analytical frameworks. The case is overwhelming. If the Hall of Fame were purely about what you did on the field, Brown is a first ballot unanimous inductee. But the Hall of Fame is not purely about what you did on the field. It never has been. The selection committee, which includes coaches, executives, media members, and former players, has always exercised judgment about the full picture of a person's career and life. Players with complicated histories have been passed over. Players with serious off-field concerns have had their inductions delayed. The Hall of Fame has a moral dimension that it does not always apply consistently, but that it does apply. And Antonio Brown's off-field record is not simply complicated, it is severe. Multiple credible sexual misconduct allegations, a settlement in the Brittany Taylor rape case, the terms undisclosed, but the fact of the settlement itself is part of the record. A no contest plea to a felony charge, a fake COVID vaccination card resulting in an NFL suspension, walking off the field mid-game, the Albany Empire debacle, the bankruptcy, the Dubai flight, and now, pending, unresolved, a second-degree attempted murder charge in Florida. If Brown is convicted of attempted second-degree murder, I believe the Hall of Fame conversation is over, permanently. There is no functional precedent for a person serving or convicted of a violent felony being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I do not think that precedent will be created for Antonio Brown, however great his on-field legacy was. If he is convicted, his career becomes one of the great what might have been stories in NFL history, spoken of in the context of talent and tragedy, never fully celebrated. If the attempted murder charge is dismissed through the stand your ground motion or through prosecutorial decision, or if he goes to trial and then he's acquitted, the Hall of Fame conversation becomes genuinely complicated in a way that deserves serious debate. Because at that point, you have a man who has multiple serious allegations in his record, but no murder conviction, whose on-field legacy is undeniable, and whose story has dimensions of trauma and systematic failure that the simple good people go in, bad people don't framework they cannot adequately address. My personal view, and I want to be clear that this is my view, not a verdict, is that Antonio Brown deserves to be in the Hall of Fame based on his play. The play speaks for itself. It always has. But I also believe, with equal conviction, that the choices he has made over the last several years are his own choices, made by an adult human being, and that the consequences of those choices are his to bear. If those consequences include being denied a Hall of Fame induction, that is not the sport rejecting him. That is the full accounting of a life coming due. And it would be heartbreaking because the player was so extraordinary. But it would not be unjust. What concerns me more than the Hall of Fame, though, is what Brown's story means for the larger conversation about how the NFL treats its players. Because Brown is not an anomaly. He is an extreme expression of something that is common. There are hundreds, potentially thousands of former NFL players living in various stages of the struggle that Brown is living at its most extreme. Players with CTE-like symptoms who have no diagnosis and no support. Players who have lost the structure that football provided and have found nothing adequate to replace it. Players who have spent through their earnings because the poverty-driven psychological that drives overspending doesn't disappear with a paycheck. Players who are struggling with impulse control and paranoia and relationship breakdown, and who are not famous enough, not spectacular enough in their deterioration to get anyone's attention. Brown is in the news. Brown gets the podcast episodes. Brown gets the hot takes. The hundreds of others don't. And the reason Brown is in the news and they aren't is partly because of how extraordinarily talented he was, and partly because of how extraordinarily public his breakdown has been. But the underlying conditions, the ACEs, the CTE risk, the identity loss, the financial vulnerability, those are shared widely across the population of people who play this game professionally. And until the NFL reckons seriously with that, not with the press release, not with the hotline number, but with actual structural investment in player health and wellness over the full arc of a player's life, not just the years they are useful to the business, the story of Antonio Brown would keep repeating itself in smaller ways and quieter ways, and ways that don't make the podcast episodes because there's no Super Bowl ring to provide context. That reckoning has not happened yet, but it needs to. And now I want to say something that I've been building toward in all of these episodes. And I want to say it carefully because this is the part where I know some of y'all might push back. Some of y'all are going to say you spent all these hours explaining Antonio Brown, you made excuses for him, and I want to be very clear about the distinction I'm making. A distinction that I think is one of the most important distinctions in how we think about human behavior generally, and not just in the context of sports. Explanation is not absolution. Understanding is not forgiveness, and compassion is not excusing. These are different things, and all of them can coexist simultaneously. Let me be specific about what I'm not saying in this episode. I'm not saying that, for those who are new, I cannot pronounce the man's name, that he is in a second-degree murder charge with, but I'm not saying that he deserved to be shot at. He did not. A man running away from a fight, retreating, does not deserve to have a gun raised at him and fired twice. Whatever happened between them before that night in May 2025, whatever history there was, whatever Brown believed was justified, a person's neck being grazed by a bullet is real harm done to a real human being. And if the evidence supports that Brown fired those shots at a retreating man, that is a serious, serious wrong, and Antonio Brown bears responsibility for it. I am not saying the employees and players of the Albany Empire don't deserve the money they are owed. They do. They showed up to do a job. They fulfilled their end of agreements. The fact that the man who failed to pay them has a complicated personal history does not absolve him of obligation to compensate people for their work. I'm not saying the moving crew in Hollywood, Florida deserved to be assaulted over an extra fee. They were there doing their job. They did nothing to warrant physical confrontation. Brown's violence toward them was wrong, regardless of what was happening inside his brain at the time. And regarding Brittany Taylor, I am not saying that her account of what happened is false, or that what she alleges she experienced is not real, or that the settlement of her case represents anything other than what it is. I am saying the case was settled, and I am not in a position to say what did or didn't happen. I've chosen throughout these episodes to discuss the allegations in terms of their existence and the pattern they are part of, rather than rendering a verdict I have no right to render. But I want to be explicit. If her account is accurate, what she describes is serious and wrong, and no amount of understanding about Brown's upbringing or his neurological history makes it okay. That's what I'm not saying. Here's what I am saying. I am saying that Antonio Brown is not a monster. Not a villain constructed from bad character who looked at the world of decent people and chose to be indecent. He is a human being who was shaped by extraordinary pain in extraordinary ways, who was given a gift that temporarily organized that pain into something beautiful, who played that gift until the gift was gone, who has been in free fall without adequate support, without culturally competent intervention, without the full accounting of what his body and brain may have been through ever since. I am saying that when we see someone like Brown, or anyone anywhere in your life, exhibiting the patterns we've discussed today, the paranoia, the inability to maintain relationships, the impulsivity, the burning of bridges before they can leave you, the desperate need for public validation, the inability to stop even when stopping is the only rational choice, we should not just say they're crazy and move on. We should ask, what happened to this person? What did they absorb? What were they never given? What kind of help did they receive? And was it the right kind of help for who they actually are? I am saying that compassion and accountability can coexist. That it is possible. Necessary, actually, to hold both simultaneously. You can believe that Antonio Brown should face the legal consequences of what he allegedly did on May 16th, 2025. And you can also believe that a man who grew up the way he grew up, who was hit in the head the way he was hit, who was failed by the systems that were supposed to support him in the ways he was failed, that man deserved better along the way than he got. Both of those things are true. They are not contradictory. They are the full complexity of a human life. And I am saying to anyone in your life who is showing signs like the ones we've discussed, whether they play football or not, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're famous or anonymous, please don't just watch. Please don't just share the clip. Reach out, check in, and if they're okay, connect them with real help if you can. Because the most dangerous thing about watching someone fall apart in public is that the public nature of it makes us feel like someone else must be handling it. Someone with more access, more authority, more resources must be doing something. They're not. No one has ever handled it for Antonio Brown. And the TikTok lives at 2 a.m. are, in their broken way, a man calling out into a void and hoping someone answers in the right language. Somebody should have answered by now. So we've been on this long journey, and it's been a real one. So let's get ready to bring it home. We started in January 2022 at MetLife Stadium with a shirtless man waving at strangers, and then we went backward to Miami, 1988, to a boy born into poverty in one of the most difficult cities in America, to a father who left when the boy was 16 to play arena football in Albany, New York. We went to the streets where shootouts were normal, to the couch surfing, to the lost scholarship and the cold call to a college coach in Michigan, and the walk-on tryout, and the MAC Freshman of the Year award. We went to the 6th round of the NFL draft and the kickoff return touchdown in the first career game, and the first Pro Bowl, and the second, and the third, and the contract extension, and the 6-year run of dominance that has not been equaled at that position in modern NFL history. We went to the Burfict hit in January 2016, lying motionless on that Cincinnati field with the stadium going quiet. We went through the fracturing of the Pittsburgh relationship, the Juju MVP vote, the fur coat, the trade request on the shop. We went to Oakland for the chirotherapy frostbite and the hot air balloon over wine country and the helmet grievance and the confrontation with the GM and the Instagram release request. We went to 11 days in New England and the civil lawsuit and the release. We went to the moving company altercation and the felony plea and the mandatory anger management. We went to Tampa Bay and the Super Bowl and the confetti and the first ever Super Bowl ring and the genuine warmth of that moment, and then the fake vaccine card and the MetLife sideline and the end. We went to the TikTok lives and the Albany Empire and the bankruptcy and the Tom Brady text messages and the Lexapro acknowledgement. And we went to Miami on May 16th, 2025 to a parking lot in Little Haiti in the early hours of the morning. And we went to Dubai, and we went to Essex County Jail in Newark. And we went to a Miami-Dade courtroom and then to a food truck where a man ordered a salad. And now here we are. July 2026. Antonio Brown is 37 years old. He is under house arrest with a GPS monitor on his ankle. He is fighting an attempted murder charge. He is in bankruptcy proceedings. He has a psychologist named Lisa Levine and a prescription for Lexapro and a lie detector admission that he does in the quiet space beneath all the performances. Regret walking off that field in New Jersey 4 years ago. He is not done. And I want to say that clearly because I think when you tell a story like this one, it can start to feel like a eulogy, like we're wrapping up a life. We're not. Brown is 37. The average American male life expectancy is 76 years. He is not even at the halfway point of a normal life expectancy. He has decades ahead of him if he chooses to use them well. He has survived things that would have ended lesser people. He survived Miami. He survived homelessness at 16. He survived losing 2 scholarships. He survived the 6th round. He survived Pittsburgh and Oakland and New England and the whole implosion. He survived 40 days in custody across 2 countries. He is still standing. That endurance, that hardness, that refusal to die, the same refusal that drove him to cold call Butch Jones and drive himself to Central Michigan, it is still in him. Whatever has happened to his brain and his choices and his money and his relationships, the core thing that made Antonio Brown, the relentlessness, impossible to stop, will to survive, that is still there. I've never doubted it for a second. The question is whether he can find a way to direct that will towards something that saves him rather than destroys him. And the brutal honesty is, we don't know. The case could go badly for him. The CTE, if it exists and is progressive, will not reverse itself. The patterns established over decades do not change easily or quickly. The wounds left by his father are deep and old. None of this resolves easily. But there are signs. The Lexapro, the psychologist whose name he knows, the yeah on the lie detector test. These are small, imperfect, messy signs. But they are signs of a man somewhere in the process of confronting something real. Not with grace, not with clarity, not with the kind of clean, redemptive narrative that makes a good movie, but real movement in the right direction. Even one step counts. Brady told him, emotional. We all need to work on this. We are emotional beings. You need to work equally as hard here. I believe Antonio Brown heard that. I believe it landed somewhere, and I believe that somewhere in the part of him that isn't performing or posturing or fighting ghosts on TikTok, there's a man who knows Brady was right, who knows that the work he always refused to do, the interior work, The emotional accounting, the sitting with the pain instead of running from it, is the work that is still waiting for him. I want to end with something that I've been sitting with throughout all of my preparation for all these episodes, especially this one. Antonio Brown, in his own words, said, CTE is not just a football thing from being hit. I just think it's from experience, trauma. Could be media people, your mom, being raised with one parent, all kinds of trauma from different phases of the world where you are from. His science is imprecise, but his intuition is not. He is reaching in the only language he has available toward the truth of what has happened to him. He is connecting his childhood, the poverty, the absent father, the fast life, to the state of his brain and his behavior. He is trying to understand himself. A man who is trying to understand himself, however awkwardly, however imperfectly, however publicly and chaotically, is not a man who has given up on himself. He is a man who is still in the fight. Just a different kind of fight than the one on the football field. A harder one. The one where only the opponent is yourself. I'm rooting for Antonio Brown. I say that clearly and I mean it without reservation. Not because what he's allegedly done is okay. Not because the people he's hurt don't matter. But because I truly believe that if someone like AB, someone who started at the very bottom of everything, who built himself from absolute zero to the peak of his profession, who showed the kind of will and resilience and the grit that you cannot fake, if someone like that can find his way back from all of this, it means the path exists. And that matters. It matters enormously. For every kid from the poverty areas of Miami or any other city in America who's watching and wondering if the chaos they grew up in, the damage they absorbed, the father who left or the mother who struggled, or the violence they witnessed, if any of that is permanent, if they can make it out and stay out, if there is a way through that, if there is a way through that isn't eventually a fail. Brown's story is not over. He is still alive, still fighting, still in his way, still waving at the crowd and asking them to see him. I see him. I think you do too. And I genuinely, sincerely hope that somewhere out there, the right person in the right language with the right understanding of where he came from and what he's carrying is finally reaching him. But he deserves to be reached. He always did. It just took everyone too long to notice, and by the time they noticed, the damage was already done. That's the lesson of this whole thing. That's the one I want you to walk away with. Not Antonio Brown was wild, not another athlete who lost it all, but this. When you see someone in pain, real pain, the kind that shows up as anger or chaos or paranoia or self-destruction, don't just watch it. Don't just click. Don't just share. Try to see what's underneath it. Try to ask what happened. Try to find the path back to them before the fall gets too far and too fast to stop. We owed that to Antonio Brown, and we owe it to the next one. This has been the Inner Heel Turn Podcast. I'm your host, JB. Thank you for riding with me on this one. I know it was long, I know it was heavy, and I know it asked a lot of you. Good, it should have. These stories ask a lot of us all. So don't miss a single episode from here on out. Subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a review if the platform lets you, and tell a friend. We try to go deep on this show because the shallow version of these stories, they just aren't good enough. The shallow version isn't honest, and the honest version, the complicated, infuriating, heartbreaking, occasionally funny, always human, honest version, is the only thing that's worth telling.
Kick push like Lupe, leg kicked out like the mama, that's how I shoot fades. Laced up in the box, now we looking like shoestrings. Fofo on my hip, say that he acting odd though. Sawed off under the seat, call it El Chapo. Hoes all over the place, looking like potholes. He dies, then he dies, now I'm sounding like Drago. Always let them bury themselves, that's how you sense fakes. I always aim straight for the head, that's how you kill snakes. Blood all over the place, told you we didn't play. Arms stretched down on the floor, just like Jesus laid. Grain, villains.